Good evening, this is Notepad. I'm your host Ibrahim Sani. We are continuing our coverage on the political events that are currently happening in the country, but we also want to understand a little bit better about the macro view of the events that are currently transpiring, including that of policies, some of the agendas that might arise from the machinations of the political alliances that arise from these events that are unfolding before our eyes. Because of this, we have a few analysts that we have lined up for you this evening. We'll start with Tricia Yeoh, the CEO of IDEAS, or the Institute of Democracy and Economic Affairs. She's joining us via telephone from her residence. Tricia, let's go through with us on the concept of whether or not this political crisis could create better policies. Alliances are slowly firming up. Just a few hours ago on this channel, we have heard confirmation from Datuk Sri Shafie Apdal that he has 105 so far, he and Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim. And does this mean that the other team basically has a little bit more than that and has enough to cross the threshold? While policies are arising from these alliances, we want to understand what kind of strategy or the kind of method that they're going to govern. What would it mean if PN or PH or another alliance come about?
Hi, Ibrahim. Thanks for having me. And yes, I think this numbers game, this race to getting past the threshold, that seems to have been the name of the game, the tune of the dance over the last 1 year plus. Unfortunately, I wish that the contestation over the numbers, the contestation over leadership would have gone beyond just the numbers game. Ideally, it would have been precisely about what we're trying to talk about tonight, right? Which is this policy competition between two sides. It's not really what we've seen thus far. Even after Tan Sri Muhyiddin put that now infamous offer on the table on Friday, which was wholesale rejected by the PH coalition, I was actually a bit disappointed to see that the statement that PH put together did not actually say anything. It did not mention anything about institutional reforms or the kinds of reforms that actually, by right, PH should have the supremacy over, because they were the ones who emerged with a lot of these reforms in their own proposals, in the manifesto, even during their time in their administration. However, I'm not sure if it was just an oversight on their part, but in short, we don't actually know what policy offers there are on the table, if it's going to be a Perikatan Nasional government versus a PH government. But however, having said that, I do agree that it is at this time that, when it's very difficult to cobble together any sort of coalition government. So yes, you mentioned that if Anwar and Shafie Apdal have 105, and if the Perikatan Nasional Coalition, yes, they've not really been working together very well, but let's assume that UMNO Bersatu and PAS are still willing to come together for unity for the sake of a very, very high stake premiership. And if they have as much as 115, or that's what we're actually hearing right now, then it's going to be very interesting to see what they have to offer and what's on their reform slate, especially considering that Muhyiddin's offer came on Friday. I'm not sure how much they're able to backtrack on that, as well as what else they're going to emerge with. If they require support from the other side, then I think that's where the reforms will be a little bit more attractive. If they don't require any support from the opposition bench, then I'm afraid that it will be business as usual, and we're going to see a return to an UMNO that's pre-2018. Because bearing in mind that the candidates that we're talking about, I think the front runner right now is Ismail Sabri, and he's been a veteran UMNO politician. Whether or not he's interested in reforms, we can't tell for sure, but I doubt it given his track record and his long-serving tenure in the party itself.
Now, whatever the alliances that are going to be built, it seems like some form of coalition has to be made from parties from Sabah and or Sarawak. We've seen how Shafi Abdal with Warisan and a few other colleagues of his from Sabah is now partnering very closely or allying very closely with Anwar Ibrahim, so-called the Gentleman's Agreement. So by default, GPS or Sarawak would definitely line up with this kind of coalition with Perikatan Nasional. It seems like Sabah and Sarawak issues are going to be thrusted back onto the mainstay. Their wants are extremely clear. We know what they want. However, do you think that there will be political will to finally get the wants done for Sabah and Sarawak?
I think that, it doesn't actually matter whichever coalition comes into place. Sabah and Sarawak demands will be there, and they will continue to be there. I think what we're seeing is, especially in the GE14, this was much, much clearer than ever before. You saw that the Pakatan Harapan Manifesto, for instance, dedicated so many different sections to Sabah and Sarawak, to federalism, to federal-state relations. And even after they came into power, they actually set up a parliamentary select committee that was dedicated to state-federal relations. And not only that, they also set up a special cabinet committee to address Sabah and Sarawak issues. So PH had the special cabinet committee, and when Perikatan Nasional came in, yes, they abolished the special cabinet committee, but they set up something else. They set up a council, a cabinet council, also to address the Sabah and Sarawak issues. So to my mind, whichever coalition comes into play will require either Sabah or Sarawakian support, not least because they already form a very large percentage, more so than they represent two states, but the number of member of parliamentary seats that they represent actually are quite high compared to the other states in the peninsula. So precisely because the numbers are there, I think their demands, their concessions would be quite, I suppose, I wouldn't say easily met, but they will hold a lot of sway in persuading whatever cabinet that comes together, that those demands will need to at least have the semblance of being met. And I mean, some of the demands, I think we know what they are, right? They've been repeated many times over the last few years already. One huge outstanding issue is about the whole resource sharing position. The fact that Sabah and Sarawak are oil-producing states, they have demanded for the royalties that are accorded to them to be much higher. They've asked for 20% instead of 5%, and I know that there's been like dithering and back and forth. Petronas has also been involved in some of these discussions, but I think what actually happened is that they've gone quiet on the royalty demands. In exchange, the government agreed to provide Sarawak the sales tax. So the sales tax over oil and gas, which was really unprecedented, right? And the PN government agreed to this. So it'll be interesting to see like the new government's position and stand. Like how much are they willing to provide these concessions to Sabah and Sarawak? The court decision, by the way, ruled that both Sabah and Sarawak have the right to it. But from what I have observed, Sabah state government has not yet demanded these sales tax proceeds to be transferred to them. So it'll be really interesting to see, where Sabah will stand, whichever government emerges out of this. The other thing that they also did was the two state governments in Sabah and Sarawak, Sarawak more than Sabah, have been more progressive and aggressive in setting up its own oil and gas company. So they have something called Petros, Petroleum Sarawak. And I think Sabah is just, eager to walk in their footsteps and to follow in their footsteps and to do the same things as well. All of this taken collectively mean that they want to assert more of their autonomy. Of course, there's a lot of talk that goes back to the Malaysia Agreement 1963 about the things that they lost along the way. And because they never felt like they had a good deal, the the politicians in Putrajaya, Kuala Lumpur, who they sometimes are a little bit, critical over these sorts of debates, these sorts of narratives will still continue to emerge. But I think trying to go back to your question, sorry, I spent a long time just talking about Sabah and Sarawak.
No, it's fine.
Just going back to your question, I found that, because I actually did the research looking at how federal and state relationships panned out over both the PH and PN government. And what I found was that during the PH administration, it was because Warisan was a supporter of PH that the Sabah demands were actually not very publicly documented. So whatever Sabah wanted, they would have done so behind closed doors. So they would have made use of their cabinet positions behind closed doors to make those demands met. So I think the same will be true whoever comes into power. And I think if the Anwar-Shafee partnership is the one that eventually wins, then Shafee is getting a good deal of forming, a cabinet as the deputy prime minister. But having said that, of course, as you pointed out, the numbers are still not quite at their side.
Right, fantastic. That was Tricia Yeoh, the CEO of Institute for Democracy and Economic Affairs. We'll go for one very short break. When we come back, we have Su-Lyn of CodeBlue. Thanks for staying on the line with us. We have Su-Lyn, the Editor-in-chief of CodeBlue. Su-Lyn, the health systems are already under strain. It's day 2 of a rather rudderless executive leading both the CITF as well as Health Ministry. How do you think things are coming along?
Well, in terms of the vaccination program, seems to be going along fine. So over more than 400,000 daily jabs were administered since Friday, and yesterday was over 500,000. So it's not so the vaccination program is going fine. But having said that, the outbreak is still growing nationwide. We recorded 10,000 more cases in the past week from August 8 to 14 compared to the previous week. So that is really quite a concern.
CodeBlue reported earlier today that COVID-19 has surged in phase 2 areas. And do you think that this is another signal of bleak days to come?
Yeah, so if we look at the data, Klang Valley seems to be declining. So Klang Valley infections in the past week declined compared to the previous week. And then if you look over the past week as well, hospital admissions, ICU cases in the Klang Valley have started to decline. And that's likely due to the extremely high vaccination coverage in the Klang Valley, because about 69% of the adult population has already been fully vaccinated. But while Klang Valley's cases, infections and severe cases are starting to go down, the outbreak nationwide is still growing, and we are seeing rising cases across nearly the entire country, except for Labuan. So even Sarawak, for example, even though their vaccination coverage is the second highest in the country, but their COVID cases have been rising since about mid-July. And their hospitalization and ICU rates also, there was a slight uptick in the past week, but their capacity is still fine. For the other states, the phase 2 states, Penang, Perak, Sabah, Terengganu, Pahang, and Kelantan. So CodeBlue reported that average daily new COVID cases rose 9 to 21-fold in these 6 states. New hospital admissions also multiplied 2 to 9-fold. So the concern there is that when you have these really high infection and hospitalization rates, because these are the states with poorer healthcare capacity than the Klang Valley. So there's a very real possibility that the outbreak could overwhelm the healthcare system in these states, particularly in Sabah. And you also see that in all these states, they recorded historical high new infections over the past week.
Okay, a little bit of inside baseball. Folks like us, journalists like us, we tend to be in close communications with folks from MOSTI or CITF. and they're very responsive. However, in a very strange place we land ourselves today and yesterday, where there wasn't any much communication coming in from that side of the town, I suppose. Do you feel that this is going to be different, the way the engagement with the press, the way the quickness, the responsiveness of CITF JKJAV responding to the queries from the public? Do you think that this might hinder in terms of how the public is going to get more information when it comes to the vaccination program?
Yeah, that's a good question, Ibrahim. So, like, for example, the CITF, after KJ's weekly press conferences, his team would update the press with weekly vaccine deliveries, for example. So we don't have that now. And there are complaints from Pakatan Harapan lawmakers in Penang about the disruption in the Pfizer vaccine supply to several PPVs in the state. Right, but then we don't know what's really going on because we don't have figures on the incoming vaccine deliveries or if there's any disruption in supply. So that is one key problem.
All right. In his farewell address, the Prime Minister yesterday says that there's enough vaccines for everyone. That targeted for end October vaccination program is still on. What do you think is the reality right now?
Okay, so before we get to the Prime Minister's target of vaccinating every single adult in the country by the end of October, let's talk first about KJ's target for 40% coverage of adults with complete vaccination in each state by Merdeka. So going by CodeBlue's projections, we look at the average 7-day average vaccination rates for both the first and second dose. Sabah and Kelantan, going by the current second dose rates, will likely hit 40% early September, but the other states will be fine. When it comes to 100% complete adult vaccination nationwide, actually, we are on target to hit the target earlier, before end October. CodeBlue's projection is September 29. But bear in mind that this is the national rate is an average of all the states. There are several states, based on the projections, where they will likely hit 100% adult vaccination after October. So, for example, Kedah, Perak, Kelantan, Terengganu, Pahang, Sabah, and Sarawak. But again, these are just based on the current vaccination rates. It could change when the vaccination focus shifts to different states. But because we don't have a government now, we don't know what the vaccination strategy is.
Okay, so which leads me to that question, right? Do you think that CITF and other governmental apparatus can work normally under civil servants as assured by the Chief Secretary of the government?
Yeah, when you say work normally, I mean, that refers to operations. So that's fine. Of course, the civil service can carry out the operations of vaccine administration or ensuring sufficient hospital capacity for COVID cases. But the real problem here is that we need a strategy, and whether it's a vaccination strategy or the epidemic management strategy, that can only be crafted by the political leadership. So like I said just now, for example, when you see outbreaks happening now across the country, outside states with high vaccination coverage like Sarawak, the Klang Valley, and Labuan, where are you going to focus, right? So that requires a decision by the political leadership. The civil servants cannot make that decision. And the reason why I emphasize that the political leadership is necessary to make these strategy decisions is because these lawmakers are the ones who will be held accountable for any public policy decisions. We cannot hold civil servants accountable because we are not voting for them, but we vote for the political leadership. So that's why it's absolutely crucial to have a functioning government back as soon as possible so that people can hold them accountable for various public policy decisions.
All right. Holding government officials accountable seems to be like a good pastime to have, but it is something that is still very much a fantasy, Su-Lyn. And because of that, we have to be a little bit more realistic into how things are going to pan out. Yesterday, my guest on this show was talking about the possibility of the issue of the political quagmire being dragged on maybe up to a month. because nobody really does have that kind of a majority. Neither you nor me are political pundits, but we do know a little bit about how the political system works. Do you think that the health system, do you think that the health systems can actually survive 1 month without any political leadership?
So again, my main point is that strategy decisions can only be made by the political leadership. And right now, before the government fell, it seemed that the health authorities and the vaccination team, they were mostly focused on using vaccines as the way out of the pandemic, which should not be the only solution, as many scientists have said, Ibrahim. Vaccines cannot be our only tool to manage COVID. This is because of the Delta, highly transmissible Delta variant. You see a lot of countries with extremely high vaccination coverage, like Israel, for example. They are seeing a huge spike in COVID infections, including a rise in hospitalization and ICU admissions. 59% of severe COVID cases in Israel as of August 15 are fully vaccinated. And that's despite Israel having fully vaccinated 78% of their population aged 12 and older. So we cannot rely on vaccines because vaccines against Delta, vaccines cannot fully prevent infection and transmission of the virus. Of course, infection rates, the chances of getting infected with COVID is much lower if you're fully vaccinated compared to unvaccinated people, and vaccines have very strong protection against severe disease and death. But when you have such a highly transmissible virus, the scientists like the UK's Oxford vaccine group, they're also saying that herd immunity is impossible with the Delta variant because vaccines cannot fully prevent infection and transmission. So what do we do then? And this is something that only the political leadership can answer, and to come up with a new public health strategy to control the outbreak.
All right, okay. Strategy aside, operational issues are still outstanding. PPV, overcrowding, you guys broke that news. COVID positive patients pushed towards private hospitals again. News can be found on CodeBlue. Do you think that the KSU or DG of Health make executive decisions for now to resolve these kind of operational issues rather quickly?
Yeah, that's fine. They can resolve operational issues. That's no problem. Things like increasing hospital capacity in states with surging infections, they can do that. The Ministry of Health can do that. But again, when it comes to focusing on which states do you focus on right now, right? Because the cases are rising nearly throughout the entire country. What happened to our FTTIS strategy, which a lot of scientists are pushing for? That it's not enough to just focus on vaccination, but we need to improve our capacity to test, trace, and isolate people quickly before they can infect others. When Malaysia reported below 20,000 daily cases since yesterday, our national positive rate hit a historical record high of 15.2% yesterday, and today it was 13.1%. We're recording more than 200 deaths every day since August 7th. The brought-in death cases are really high. So how do we resolve all this? Obviously, the current strategy that we're using is not working.
Yeah, of course it's not working. That's the thing. And while nobody wants to talk about the real numbers, isn't supposed to be 110, 111, 105. It's actually 200 deaths. It's actually 21,000 daily cases positive. Those are the kind of numbers that we need to be talking about. And yet we are stuck with talking about the numbers of the parliament. But thank you very much, Su-Lyn. That was a very insightful and a rather scary outlook that you can share with us. I'm sure we can bring you back in on the show in the days to come, because COVID is still happening. They don't care really about the situation of the political system of the country. And because of that, we really need to keep you close on hand. Until then, thanks very much. That was Su-Lyn, the Editor-in-chief of CodeBlue. We now move on to the Communications Director of Research for Social Advancement, Raja Ahmad Iskandar Fareez. Iskandar, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us. Earlier on, we had Shafi Abdal confirming that he has 105 MPs supporting him. And of course, when I say supporting him, it's the supporting him and Datuk Seri Anwar. In fact, the kind of statements that is coming up now is that, to quote unquote, kita putuskan ada dua calon, pertama Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim, keduanya saya Shafiq Abdal. That's what he said, quote unquote. So now we're trying to understand, what do you think, or what do you make of that statement that was issued by Shafiq Abdal, and of course the earlier statement by Datuk Seri Anwar in front of the palace after his engagement with the Yang di-Pertuan Agong. These two statements seem to be in tandem with each other. What can we make out of this?
Okay, Ibrahim. First and foremost, I think there are various rumors circulating. Many candidates seem to be at the front line, at the top of the list, but it contradicts each other. So at this moment, from the looks of it, we are still at the point where no one seems to have the required majority to hold support or form a government. When we discuss about this, we need to bear in mind that we are currently entering into a phase of multi-party system. Even though if we're not ready, we need to be ready for it. And I think to follow on what Anwar Ibrahim said and what the supposedly Tuanku said to him was that it's refreshing to see that political parties now need to reset and envision a new coalition model and a new way of working together. So political parties need to now learn how to collaborate, find a common ground, and hopefully not repeat the mistakes that PN made during its tenure, which is to pursue political dominance instead of cooperation. Having said that, I think Muhyiddin's olive branch, although came too late over the last weekend, was interesting. It sets a ground, a common ground at least, for the opposition or any other PM aspiring PM candidates to negotiate with among the different blocs. Most of them, we need to note, are ideas from the PH bloc themselves. So this prepares for a common platform that would be essential. Needed to save Malaysian lives, Malaysian livelihoods, and also the Malaysian economy.
Do you think that the risk is very serious when it comes to handling all the kind of events that are currently happening in the country? Just now, I'm sure you've heard the Editor-in-chief of CodeBlue talking about the kind of risk that lie ahead when it comes to not having any political leadership on healthcare. That's just healthcare. We haven't had conversations on the economic well-being yet. Political leadership is actually crucial, but because of this delay or this lengthening of events that are currently happening, where do you think the risk lie when it comes to measuring the timeline of achieving a decision?
Well, to be honest, the longer we take, or the longer the political elites take to make a decision, the longer we put people's issue, which is very pressing, at the back burner. COVID trends, as we can see, that used to be only surging in the Klang Valley area, confined the Klang Valley area, is now spreading to other states. Kedah, Sabah, Kelantan, we are seeing surges of cases in these states. And keep in mind, the healthcare facilities in these areas might not be able to cope in large surges in ICU admission. So we are facing a huge problem there. That would be the main thing that the next government needs to take on their order of business. On the political front, I think one most contentious issue is still the role of PM, because the role of PM in Malaysia is overpowered. We can see from the previous administration, the PN administration, there was constant instability because UMNO keeps vying for the PM seat, while the PM himself tried to consolidate power by either enticing jumps from the other team or appointing people who are close to him to shore up power. So think about it. If we form the next government, if any PM form the next government, this should be one of the main concerns, how to keep the next government stable. Political stability in the environment of multi-party system is going to be elusive, to be honest. But we can lead to something that is a sustainable approach of functioning political order. Think about it. If if Malaysia were to form a government that is part of a grouping of former rivals, let's say, these people don't trust each other. So the only choice is for the aspiring PM to promise reforms and build up institutions for check and balance. What he can do is this aspiring PM can actually limit the power of PM, empower parliamentary select committees instead, put opposition at that time figures on these parliamentary select committees as chairman. Then the executive and the legislative arm of the government can rule together in a true bipartisanship manner that leads to not just stability in the short term, but also a sustainability in policy and continuity in policy in case the government changes. So we are not looking at now whether the government can fall or not. It looks more about the next formula to keep the governance going.
Right now as we speak, there are consecutive meetings, one by UMNO Supreme Council, another one by Barisan Nasional MPs. They are there at Menara Dato' On in WTC in KL. It seems like some rumors have emerged deciding that they have decided to put forward one name. And of course, they need to still cobble together some form of alliances, particularly friendly alliances, one that they have made before. It seems like they have enough to cross that magic number of 110 plus 1, so 111 seats. Is this a quick resolution? Is this good for the country?
Well, I maintain with what I said. If we do not address these systemic issues, we might be heading to another drama like this in the months to come. So institutional change needs to happen. And there's also this dangerous notion that once pandemic ends and then we can do election and then we vote a new government, it will be a stable government. In a multi-party context, more often than not, we'll end up in a similar outcomes. No one will have a clear majority. And then if we continue to play the game of political dominance, everyone loses, as we can see today. So back to what the Yang Di-Pertuan Agong said to the politicians. And many of us political observers have said before, politicians need to rid themselves of this aim to pursue dominance. It's time to work together. They should realize working together is in their interest, and also, more importantly, it's the interest of the rakyat.
Okay, one final question that I have to ask you is on the risk that lie ahead when it comes to a prolonged decision. We've had a lot of conversations when it comes to health systems risk, economic systems risk. Now we want to understand what possible other risks that lie ahead if this thing is dragged on for weeks or even months, God forbid, to come.
Well, since we covered the economics, healthcare side, maybe the other side of the risk is the trust in democracy. The longer we take to resolve this, I'm afraid that more people will be disenchanted with democracy and will take the process for granted. And that risks us backsliding into a more autocratic form of government, that we end up losing more right to decide on what kind of leaders we elect to the parliament or those who will be administrating over us on our behalf. So I think more democratization is better for the nation, but it's an arduous process. So it's really for the long run. We might see a backsliding here and there, but as long as we push through, we can get to the destination eventually.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much. That was Raja Ahmad Iskandar Fareez, the Communications Director of REFSA, or the Research for Social Advancement. Here's a quick recap of the items that have happened this evening. We have just heard from our colleague, our Astro AWANI reporter Firdaus Azil from the World Trade Center that there are two meetings that are currently happening right now there. One is the meeting on the UMNO Supreme Council. They are trying to decide who is that single name that they will put forward to be nominated as the Prime Minister. And the subsequent meeting that follows after that is the meeting with the Barisan Nasional MPs for the same reason. And as we speak, it seems like the Member of Parliaments are now on the way downstairs from WTC. It's unclear if any of them will issue a statement, but whatever it is, our reporter Firdaus Azil is there, and if there's anything else or anything new, we will break this news to you for now. While we talk about this, the context or the background of this is that the Speaker of the House, the Speaker of the Dewan Rakyat, have issued an instruction from the August House to all the members of the Dewan Rakyat to issue some sort of a statutory declaration announcing or declaring who they want as their nominee for the Prime Minister, and the deadline for MPs to make this declaration is tomorrow at 4 p.m. And because of this, there's a host of meetings that has been done by all the political parties for the past 2 days under the Caretaker government. And what has happened is that some official announcements have come out. One such announcement was from Datuk Sri Shafiq Apdal just a few hours ago on our marquee show, Agenda AWANI, where he says that on his blog, Shafiq Apdal's block, which consists of Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim as well, is that they have 105 MPs for now. And the structure of the statement that Datuk Sri Shafiq Apdal says that one name is Anwar Ibrahim, the second name is Shafiq Apdal. So those are the kind of things that are currently happening or playing out right now. Remember that there is still an arduous process that needs to be gone through right now. The Parliament needs to convene the presumptive Prime Minister, assuming he has been appointed by the Yang di-Pertuan Agong, still needs to command the confidence from the floor. And right now it's scheduled at on September 7th, but I don't know whether that will take place yet because all this is still on the balance. Until then, keep up to date with Astro AWANI. There's a lot that will be unpacked, all the breaking news that will be brought to you live from this channel. You can watch us on all our social sites as well. Until then, thanks very much for watching. My name is Ibrahim Sani. Until next time.